The smell of greasy burgers and coffee hung heavy in the air as the fluorescent lights of the truck stop diner flickered overhead. It was the kind of place where long-haul truckers, weary travelers, and the occasional passerby could grab a bite, exchange stories, and unwind. For most, it was a sanctuary from the road. For Tom Garrison, it was a quick pit stop on the way to his next case. Tom wasn't your average lawyer. Known for his sharp wit, no-nonsense demeanor, and a knack for dismantling even the most airtight arguments, he had built a reputation as one of the toughest litigators in the state. But tonight, he wasn't wearing a suit or carrying a briefcase. Instead, he was dressed casually, jeans, a checkered shirt, and sneakers, trying to blend in as he nursed a cup of black coffee at the far corner of the counter. The diner wasn't exactly quiet. A group of bikers had taken over a booth near the back, their laughter loud and grating, dominating the otherwise relaxed atmosphere. Tom didn't pay them much attention at first. He had bigger things on his mind, a high-profile case that needed his full focus. He flipped through the legal notes on his phone, letting the noise fade into the background. That was until the shouting started. Tom glanced up, his sharp eyes narrowing as he saw one of the bikers grab the wrist of a young waitress. Her tray clattered to the floor as she tried to pull away, her face pale and scared. The other bikers roared with laughter, egging their friend on. The few other patrons in the diner avoided eye contact, either too scared or unwilling to intervene. Tom sighed, setting his phone down and pushing his coffee away. He stood, his movements calm and deliberate, and walked toward the group. His footsteps echoed against the tiled floor, cutting through the bikers' laughter. "Let her go," Tom said, his voice steady but firm. The biker holding the waitress turned, his smirk widening as he sized Tom up. "And who the hell are you?" Tom didn't flinch. "Someone you don't want to mess with." The laughter from the booth died down as the rest of the bikers turned to look at Tom. The one holding the waitress let go of her wrist, but not out of respect. It was more of a taunt. He leaned back in the booth, crossing his arms, his grin stretching wider. "And what are you gonna do about it, cowboy?" he sneered, his tone dripping with mockery. Tom's eyes didn't waver. He glanced at the waitress, who stood frozen, her tray still lying on the floor. "You okay?" he asked her, his voice softer now. She nodded shakily, mumbling a quiet, "Thank you," before scurrying off toward the kitchen. The biker closest to Tom stood up, towering over him. He was built like a brick wall, his leather vest hanging open to reveal an array of tattoos snaking across his chest. "You think you can just waltz over here and give us orders?" he said, his voice low and threatening. The other bikers leaned forward, their chairs creaking as they prepared to join in. Tom's expression didn't change. He didn't back down, didn't even step away. "I don't need to give you orders," he said, his tone calm but firm. "Just some advice. Leave her, and everyone else in here, alone. Finish your meal and walk out." The lead biker tilted his head, pretending to consider the suggestion. Then, with a quick motion, he grabbed Tom by the collar, pulling him closer. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," he growled. "But guts won't stop you from getting hurt." Tom's eyes flicked down to the biker's hand gripping his shirt. With a speed that took everyone by surprise, Tom twisted free, stepping back and raising his hands. "I'm not looking for a fight," he said evenly. "But if you push me, you'll regret it." The biker's grin faltered for a moment, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. "Oh, you're one of those guys," he said, glancing back at his crew. "Thinks he's a tough guy because he watches action movies." The other bikers laughed, slapping the table, but Tom didn't respond. Instead, he stood his ground, his posture relaxed but ready. It was the kind of stance that made people second-guess their assumptions. The tension in the diner was thick now, the other patrons watching silently from their seats. Even the cook had stopped flipping burgers, his spatula frozen in midair. The biker lunged forward, his massive hand reaching for Tom again, but this time, Tom was ready. He sidestepped the attack, grabbing the biker's arm and twisting it behind his back in one smooth motion. The biker let out a grunt of pain, his bravado replaced with anger. "I warned you," Tom said quietly, releasing the man and stepping back again. The other bikers shot to their feet, their chairs screeching against the floor. "Big mistake, pal," one of them growled, reaching into his jacket. Tom's eyes narrowed and his muscles tensed, but the man only pulled out a heavy chain, wrapping it around his fist. The leader of the gang, still rubbing his arm, barked out a laugh. "All right, lawyer boy, you wanted a fight. Let's see what you got." The word lawyer caught some of the patrons off guard. Tom didn't exactly look like the type to spend his days in courtrooms, but the bikers had clearly figured it out. Maybe they'd seen him pull up in his modest car with the legal briefs on the dashboard, or maybe they'd overheard him on the phone earlier. "Yeah," Tom said with a faint smirk. "I'm a lawyer. That doesn't mean I can't handle myself." The gang wasn't laughing anymore. They spread out, circling Tom like predators closing in on their prey. The lead biker swung first, his fist flying toward Tom's head, but Tom ducked, moving with a precision that spoke of training far beyond your average self-defense class. Tom landed a quick jab to the biker's ribs, sending him stumbling backward. Another biker charged at him from behind, swinging the chain wildly. Tom turned just in time, grabbing a nearby chair and using it to block the attack. The chain wrapped around the chair's leg, giving Tom just enough time to disarm his attacker with a sharp kick to the knee. The other bikers hesitated now, their confidence wavering. Tom straightened, catching his breath, and glanced at the remaining three. "Still think this is a good idea?" he asked. The leader, seething with rage, growled, "You're dead, you hear me? Dead!" He gestured to the others, and they all lunged at Tom at once. It was chaos. Tables overturned, dishes shattered, and the lights flickered as Tom used every ounce of his training to fend them off. He wasn't invincible. He took a few hits, his lip splitting and his ribs aching, but he didn't let up. He ducked, dodged, and countered with precision, using the confined space of the diner to his advantage. At one point, he grabbed a ketchup bottle from the counter and smashed it across the face of one of the bikers, sending him sprawling onto the floor. Another biker swung a bar stool, but Tom ducked low, sweeping the man's legs out from under him. The leader was the last one standing, his face red with fury. He charged at Tom like a bull, swinging wildly. Tom stepped to the side at the last second, causing the biker to crash into the counter with a loud thud. Before the man could recover, Tom grabbed him by the vest and slammed him against the wall. "This ends now," Tom said, his voice low and steady. "You leave this place, and you don't come back. Do you understand me?" The biker glared at him, but the fight had gone out of his eyes. He nodded begrudgingly, and Tom released him. The leader stumbled toward the door, shouting at his crew to follow. As the bikers limped out of the diner, the room fell silent. Broken plates and chairs littered the floor, and the other patrons stared at Tom in stunned silence. The cook finally broke the tension with a nervous laugh. "Remind me not to mess with you," he said, shaking his head. Tom wiped the blood from his lip and gave the man a faint smile. "Sorry about the mess," he said, glancing around. The waitress, who had been hiding behind the counter, stepped forward, her eyes wide. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I didn't know what to do." Tom nodded, picking up his jacket from the floor. "Just doing what anyone should," he said. As the bikers' motorcycles roared away in the distance, Tom knew this wasn't over. Men like them didn't just give up. They regrouped, planned, and came back stronger. But Tom didn't regret stepping in. He'd dealt with bullies in courtrooms and back alleys alike, and he wasn't about to let fear dictate his actions now. For now, though, the diner was safe. Tom walked back to his coffee, picking up the cup and taking a sip as if nothing had happened. Around him, the patrons began to murmur, their shock giving way to quiet admiration. The lawyer had shown them all that sometimes the quietest person in the room was the one you really didn't want to mess with. The sound of motorcycles roaring into the night finally faded, leaving the diner in an eerie silence. Tom sat back down at the counter, brushing off the dust from his shirt and ignoring the stares from the remaining patrons. His coffee was cold now, but he didn't mind. He took a sip, his mind already replaying the encounter. His lip throbbed from the cut, and his ribs ached from where one of the bikers had landed a solid punch. But none of it mattered. The bikers were gone, for now. The young waitress cautiously stepped forward, her hands shaking as she began picking up the broken dishes from the floor. Tom noticed and got up, kneeling to help her gather the pieces. "You don't have to do that," she said softly, her voice still trembling. Tom gave her a reassuring smile. "It's all right. Besides, I'm probably the reason for most of the mess." The other patrons, emboldened now that the danger had passed, began murmuring their thanks. An older trucker slapped Tom on the shoulder. "Hell of a thing you did there," he said. his gruff voice filled with admiration. Not a lot of people would have stood up to them. Tom nodded but didn't say much. He wasn't one for grand gestures or basking in gratitude. He'd stepped in because it was the right thing to do, not for recognition. As the waitress returned to the kitchen, Tom pulled out some cash from his wallet and left more than enough to cover his coffee and the damages. He glanced at the clock on the wall, realizing he still had a long drive ahead. But as he walked out to his car, he paused, looking down the dark highway where the bikers had disappeared. He knew this wasn't the last he'd see of them. Men like that didn't take kindly to being shown up. But Tom wasn't worried. He'd dealt with bullies before, in courtrooms and in life, and he was ready for whatever came next. For now, though, the road called, and Tom slipped behind the wheel, driving off into the night with quiet resolve.